Welcome back. So let's talk about appreciation. This is what most real estate investors think they're investing for. And you know what? It's fantastic when it happens. It's not very reliable. And this is why I like being a cash flow investor. But when you can earn some return from appreciation, it's the home run. It's where you really knock it out of the ballpark. Historically, real estate has appreciated at or even a little bit above the rate of inflation when you average things out over the years. And of course, we've talked about linear, cyclical, and hybrid markets. And the appreciation markets are really all of these markets, of course, okay? It's the cyclical markets that if you time them right, or even if you don't time them right, and maybe you're just lucky, where you can really knock it out of the park and get some fantastic home run returns on your appreciation. So, our learning objectives for this lesson are: we'll learn what economic factors generate appreciation, which areas of cities tend to drive appreciation. Now, when we talk about cities and markets and towns and counties and states and different parts of geography, I want to mostly have you think of that in terms of the broadest part, in terms of MSAs, what's known as metropolitan statistical areas. Because, of course, many areas, many so-called cities, have a lot of little cities that are neighboring places right next to each other, right? So if you take Los Angeles, where I grew up, you've got all sorts of cities jumbled into what people would just call LA or Los Angeles, which is a really sprawling suburbia. I want you to think of these things mostly in terms of MSAs. And within the MSA, what is commonly referred to as a city, then you have various submarkets or neighborhoods or communities or villages. People refer to these things by a lot of different names, okay? So just keep that in mind as we're talking about this stuff throughout this course and throughout your career as a real estate investor. Okay, also we'll learn how to calculate the returns from leveraged appreciation. Archimedes, a long time ago, he talked about the power of leverage, and this is one of the most powerful aspects of real estate, and even more so, income property, because we can leverage our returns. Archimedes said, "Give me a lever long enough and I will move the entire world." And that is the power of leverage. So we're going to dive into that, especially in this lesson, but throughout the course as well. What economic factors generate appreciation? Let's dive in here. So immigration. When the population increases through immigration, that increases housing demand, whether it be for rents or for purchases. And regardless of which one you have, you're likely to have upward pressure on prices or upward pressure on rents. So in migration, when I say in migration, I mean people moving into an area. Also, some people refer to this as the path of progress when there's development and growth in an area. So you want to have in-migration rather than out-migration. In-migration, by the way, is IN. It's not immigration. Okay, so just make sure you understand the distinction between those words I'm using. Strong employment. It is largely about jobs. Jobs are what drive real estate. Now, I know there are many people, and I'm not a believer in this, who invest, they think they're investors, and they invest in vacation homes. And we like long-term, stable income properties. Property that someone needs to live in because they have a job in that area. That's what we think is the stronger, safer, more prudent, more conservative investment that will last for many, many years. So employment, definitely a factor. What is the job growth in this area? Is the area losing jobs? Is it creating jobs? Or is it just a stable market? And it can be okay if it's just stable, but of course, if it's creating a lot of jobs, there's a lot of job growth. That's the key phrase you want to look for, job growth. Then it's very good. But then you have to ask yourself, of course, what type of jobs is it creating? Is it creating high-paying white-collar jobs? Is it creating low-paying blue-collar jobs? Or is it creating even lower-paying service sector jobs? You know, if you're hiring waiters and busboys, that is not going to increase your real estate values a whole bunch. Whereas if you've got highly paid professionals, white-collar people working in offices, well, they're higher paid, and that's going to drive more appreciation. So strong employment, definitely a factor. Strong homeowner segment. When you look at the mix, now, as an appreciation investor, this is where it differs from being a cash flow investor in another way. Because when you look at a strong homeowner segment, you know, there's a mix in any given area, right? How much of the population is renters and how much of the population is homeowners? And as a cash flow investor, I don't mind if there are a lot of renters, because a lot of these people that don't buy in these certain markets, maybe they're more transient markets where, Houston would be a great example. I've owned properties in Houston. We've been helping clients invest in Houston for many years, and we kind of, at the time of this recording, put a little bit of a pause on Houston because of what's going on with oil prices, but overall, it seems to be faring pretty well, but we're kind of watchful of it, kind of a yellow light on that market at this very moment. But Houston is a good example of a city that is a reasonably high renter population. And one of the reasons for this is that it's a little bit transient. You have a big medical employment base there, and you also have a big energy and oil employment base there. And I've had many tenants in my Houston properties who move there for a year or 2 years, and they might be, one guy I remember really well, really nice tenant that I had. I was self-managing this property long distance, and this guy was just an awesome tenant, but I've had many awesome tenants over the years for sure. And I remember I was talking to him one day on the phone, never met him in person. By the way, I never actually saw that property either. So we do teach people how to self-manage properties from a long distance, or you can use a property manager. This one I was self-managing. And anyway, this guy was an oil platform engineer. So they just moved him to Houston for a short time. He's not a good buyer. He's not going to buy a property. He's better off being a renter, because the cost of going in and out of a property in such a short time would not be a good a deal for him. It would not be a wise investment. So what is the mix of the homeowner versus renter segment? And if you're looking for appreciation, okay, and of course we're looking for cash flow and appreciation, both are better than just one, but if you're really an appreciation-focused investor, you'll want to lean more toward the strong homeowner segment. Limited new real estate development. Obviously, the most basic rule of economics is what? Supply and demand. We all know this, right? Intuitively, hopefully we know that. And if there's a lot of new development, that is going to limit the appreciation potential in a given market, because they keep adding more supply, and you want the supply to be limited if you're investing for appreciation. So appreciation markets have strong economic fundamentals, employment, and in-migration of people. And the key factor that drives appreciation in markets is the lack of new development that constricts supply. So let's dive into this. What areas of cities tend to drive appreciation? Well, scarcity, employment, and growth, right? We've been talking about that. So what is scarcity? Market areas without lots of open space to develop are primed for rapid appreciation because you have that supply constriction And employment. Key driver of in-migration is job growth. We talked about that, of course, and that is very, very important. Overall growth, right? Ultimately, is this baked into the local economy? Is this something that will drive people to make a decision to buy or start a business or develop properties? So here, we always want to consider whether the area is business friendly or business unfriendly. Two hugely opposite examples would be California, where I live, in La Jolla, California. Just moved here, by the way. Or Texas. Look at the difference in these two areas, right? California, known a reputation for being very business unfriendly. Now, many people live here and tolerate the business unfriendly environment just because that's where they started many years ago, that's where their friends and family are, that's where their business is based, or because, California's got a beautiful coastline, of course, and maybe they're well off enough that they can take the tax hit, they can take all the additional regulations and just tolerate it, biting their tongue and staying in a place like California. Texas, on the other hand, very, very business friendly, welcoming new businesses with open arms, where a government does not interfere and a government is friendly to business. Also, what we look for is, as cash flow investors for the long term, we look for landlord friendliness and landlord unfriendliness. And that would be true just as the business was in Texas versus California. Texas, much more friendly to landlords. California, pretty unfriendly to landlords. And we'll probably touch on that subject some more later in the course. But it's certainly one of the things we look for as nationwide investors or even worldwide investors, right? Calculating returns from leveraged appreciation, the total price appreciation divided by the amount of cash invested. So, for example, a $100,000 property that appreciates by $10,000 with a total cash investment of $20,000 has a 10% rate of ordinary appreciation, but a 50% rate of leveraged appreciation. Because see, you put $20,000 into the deal, and for that $20,000 that you put in, you got $10,000 back in your first year. So you did not earn a 10% return. You got a 50% return. Because remember, the bank put in 80% of the money for you to buy this property. Now, of course, you have some closing costs on the way in, on the way out, which will diminish these returns. But conceptually overall, this is one of the good reasons to keep your real estate. Don't sell it. Keep it for the long term. And that's why it should be a sustainable cash flowing property, because then the closing costs become amortized over many, many years, and it keeps your returns much higher. If you sell them quickly, you're going to really eat up your returns. The leveraged appreciation is net of any realtor commissions, title fees, closing costs, etc. Okay? Now, typically, you're going to see realtors trying to charge you 6%. Of course, this number is negotiable. It's not set by law, but somehow or another, that has become popular, I will say. But you can certainly negotiate it. You can sell your property yourself. You can do all kinds of things, okay? There are other options out there. And, maybe $1,000 in title fees. By the way, this really shouldn't be called title fees. It's, overall closing costs. $10,000 of leverage appreciation. Above is $3,000 of net appreciation, because you've got to subtract the cost. And this is why you don't want to sell your properties quickly. You want to keep them for many years, okay? The rate of return on a property should be annualized to show what it would look like for a single year. The annualized return calculations are automated in the lesson template, okay? Of course, to earn your badge, you're going to be uploading this, right? So this makes it easier to compare the returns between deals with a short versus long-term holding period. And again, income property, all real estate really should be considered a longer-term investment. What do I mean by longer term? Well, that's somewhat subjective, but I would say you really want to keep your properties for at least 5 or 7 years. Hopefully longer. Hopefully they're just going to be annuities for you. They're just going to be income, cash cows, where they'll appreciate, plus they'll throw off cash for you as well. When you hold for less than 1 year, the annualized return will be higher than your gross return, okay? Because, of course, we've got those closing costs. When you hold for a year, annualized return will be lower, okay? So that's what we've got to think of. So what are the action items? Calculate the net appreciation for 5 properties, okay? And the badge action is to look up 5 recently sold properties on Zillow, taking note of the 2 most recent sale prices and the dates, because time is an important factor here. And you calculate the annualized rate of return for each property after deducting the closing cost. Upload the spreadsheet, okay? And I believe this is going to be in the form of a screenshot. So that is your task for this lesson on appreciation. We're going to have lots of ongoing content for you and more lessons to come in the course where we're going to touch on these issues as well. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next lesson.